Welcome to an introduction to accounting, brought to you by Parkbench Tutors and narrated by David Hopcroft. You can find more information about Parkbench Tutors on parkbenchtutors.com, or you can look us up on Facebook, Parkbench Tutors. In this podcast on costing, we're going to continue our look at variances, and we're going to continue by looking at variable overhead. Variance analysis is when we compare standard costs and actual costs, and the differences are variances. And in managerial accounting, we look to identify variances, look at the cause of those variances, and see if there's any corrective action that can be taken. So we're looking at variable overheads, and variable production overheads for our example are from Dream Designs to produce the polar coat. And we can see that the variable production overheads cost £5 per unit per hour, and there are 4 hours required. So if we look at our budget costs for 3,000 coats, we would say that normally takes 12,000 hours. So 12,000 hours at £5 an hour comes to 60,000. So our variable production overheads would be £60,000. Now, the actual production overhead that we're looking at for the period, the variable production overhead was £65,000, but our actual production of coats was not 3,000 but 3,600. So this is the information that we need to do our calculations. So our total variance is, for the standard cost for 3,600 coats, we would multiply 5 by 4 times 3,600. In other words, the £5 times the 4 hours per unit times the 3,600 coats, giving 72,000, whereas the actual cost was 65,000. So the variance here is 7,000, and that's favourable because the actual cost was less than the standard cost. Let's break that up and look at the variable overhead rate. The standard hours that we should have worked, ignoring the idle time, were 11,500 hours that were worked, times the 5 is 57,500. But the actual rate for the 11,500 was 65,000. So here the variance is adverse. The actual rate was more than the standard rate for the hours that we worked. So let's look at the variable overhead efficiency variance. The standard efficiency for 1,600 coats, well, it should have taken 14,400 hours, but our actual efficiency was 11,500 hours. So that was an improvement, because it was less, of 2,900 hours. So if I multiply the 2,900 by the £5 an hour rate, I will get 14,500. And that is a favourable variance. So my efficiency variance is favourable by 14,500. I'm now in a position to reconcile that. If we take the actual cost of 65,000, we have an adverse rate variance of 7,500, favourable efficiency variance 14,500, and that has got to balance the standard cost of 72,000. So the actual cost plus the favourable less the adverse equals the standard cost. We could have written that the other way and taken the standard cost, take away the favourable, add the adverse, and that will equal the actual cost. For reconciliation, all you've got to remember really is standard costs are obviously going to be reduced by favourable variances, but they would be increased by adverse variance. So standard less favourable plus adverse should always equal actual cost. This ends our short podcast on variances, brought to you by Parkbench Tutors. Thank you for watching and listening. If you want more information about Parkbench Tutors, including a playlist for the costing podcasts, look us up on parkbenchtutors.com.